Go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Keeping It Behavioral, where we are empowering parents one episode at a time and breaking down behavior analytical topics to what they look like in the real world. Before we get started, I wanted to share a quick update. My previous partner has stepped down from the podcast, but I'm very grateful for the time we've shared together, and I'm really excited to introduce our new co-host, Justine Cardoza.
Hello.
She's amazing, and she's deeply passionate about supporting both neurotypical and neurodivergent learners, creating a safe and inclusive space for them to thrive, and bringing empathy and openness into everything she does. With years of experience working with children across a wide range of settings and with a strong belief in the importance of representation and diversity, she's a wonderful addition to the Keeping It Behavioral team. So everybody give
Thank
her a warm
you.
welcome.
Thank
So
you, Ray. I really appreciate that.
yes. And so, for the very first time, our real intro begins. So, my name is Ray Trank, and I'm joined by my beautiful co host.
Justine Cardoza.
Yes. And today we have a very special episode that is a topic that is honestly very near and dear to both Justine and my heart. And it is called PDA, which is Pathological Demand Avoidance.
Awesome. That was a beautiful intro, Ray, by the way. Love that.
Oh, thank you.
But yes, PDA is something that's close to both of our hearts. And it really matters because being able to understand your child or your sibling, your parents on a further and deeper level to know what best serves them as far as how you approach them and how you arrange the environment for them is really, really important. So we wanted to make sure that we took the time to talk about this because it's something that is becoming a lot more talked about in the field, a lot more analyzed and observed through different lenses nowadays. So we just wanted to make sure we touch base on these things. So we really want to make sure that we're trying to find every and any way to support the parents that we are able to, work with and be able to make a difference in their lives in a way that meets the needs of their kids as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that really led us to this topic too is, especially when you're looking at treatment, this is the type of learner, the profile of learner where those traditional strategies don't feel like they're working.
Yeah.
And that can just lead to so much frustration for families. And so I guess just to begin, breaking down what exactly is PDA, what is pathological demand avoidance, and why is this even important to us? So PDA profiles are often seen in autistic individuals, sometimes non-autistic individuals. And, it's not a separate diagnosis, but it does have some core features that can be easily identifiable, and you can talk to mental health professionals about this diagnosis. So the core features are extreme avoidance of demands, which is obviously listed in the name. But where this stems from is a really intense need for control that results in really intense anxiety, and oftentimes presents through a lot of pushback from those learners when you're trying to, just do simple things with them.
Yeah, a lot of bigger emotions and stronger emotional reactions to things that might seem like a simple, hey, can you grab this? Or will you do this? Or even just calling their name. But sometimes even calling their name feels like a demand. And then it starts to dysregulate them. It's not just that I don't want to do what you're telling me. It's physically hearing you tell me that in this moment doesn't allow me to do what you need me to do because I need to regulate first. So it's a different way to reframe how we're, looking at what might seem like refusal or I just don't want to listen when it's really I need more support in this moment to then be able to listen and do what you need from me.
Right. And I think what's important to highlight about this topic too is, with our learners, understanding that this is a certain profile of a learner really helps us to, reframe the demands that we're presenting and reframe our interactions to make a more successful learning environment for them, or even as a parent, a more successful environment for you to do those everyday things that feel like they are so hard. And like Justine said, simple things like, go get dressed, grab your water bottle, go sit in the car. Those seem like really simple things because we're constantly giving directives as adults all the time to our kiddos. But when you're approaching those things with those who have a diagnosis of PDA, you have to be really careful about the wording because this elicits a fight or flight response oftentimes in our learners. And like Justine said, then we're now having to do a whole regulation thing, trying to de-escalate their nervous system to get them back to homeostasis to move forward. So we wanted to approach this through, of course, a behavioral lens, because we are a behavioral podcast. And so, like I wanted to emphasize earlier, avoidance has that functional piece for our learners. For them, we're thinking about the function of why they're engaging in those pathological demand avoidance behaviors is they're trying to escape it to avoid distress that's occurring in that moment. They're feeling heightened anxiety. They're feeling like they're in this fight or flight type situation. And so they're going to do whatever they can to escape that demand. This can, present in a few different ways. Maybe you're seeing that just in refusal, straight up. Maybe you're seeing it in delaying, creating, or following through with the task demand. Maybe they're making a lot of jokes or trying to distract you from whatever the demand is. It's not always flopping on the floor with emotional heightened reactions, right? But they can be, right? They can be. They can also be meltdowns, can be shutting down. And it can also present in some kids where you're seeing this really stark contrast in how they're acting, where they can go from being super lighthearted and giggly with you one moment, immediately they're flipping the script where now they are angry, heightened emotions, sobbing, which we can call the Jekyll and Hyde presentation, where it's this extreme dichotomy of presentation. And so when you're looking at this, it's really important that you're looking at, three key factors. It's the intensity of what's happening, the pervasiveness of it, and what is the emotional cost that's happening when we're seeing this demand avoidance.
Absolutely. So I think I really appreciate how you touched base on the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, how it can so quickly seem like you were happy, regulated, and engaged, and you were enjoying the task you were doing. And then I asked you one quick thing, and then boom, it feels like that's the worst thing I could have ever asked you in that moment. And that really highlights how it's not just I'm trying to be defiant. It's this dysregulated me in less than a second. And now I need support so that I can regulate myself and then follow through with what it is, or we can talk about what it is. And then that teaches kiddos and learners, different self-advocacy skills and being able to help them as well. So it definitely is an important thing to be able to navigate appropriately to support your learner through behavior patterns that will build in the future as well too. I can think of a quick example of a client that I've been able to work with who morning routines are rough for them. So getting up in the morning, having to, do all these things that aren't naturally reinforcing, like brushing your teeth, going to the bathroom, making your bed, things that all learners and all children aren't normally mostly reinforced by and aren't normally really excited to go do. Because I can't remember a time I was really excited to brush my teeth as a kid. So,
even as an adult, you wake up and you're like, oh,
right.
Now I start my day. Yeah.
Right. So having to think outside the box with approaches to make things more naturally engaging and reinforcing and make them feel like it's not a demand, but something they genuinely want to do is something that definitely makes you rack your brain as a BCBA or as a parent. Like, how can I make you want to brush your teeth so that way, you build up those healthy habits, and also it doesn't have to be a battle because it's dysregulating you. It can dysregulate me. So finding the ways to support with that is really important. And something that I found that's been beneficial with some of my PDA kiddos is turning things into something fun, like a race or a competition, if that's something the learner can tolerate, obviously with that caveat. But if you want to race and I'm going to race, okay, cool. Let's see who can go to the bathroom first, wash their hands and turn off the light and get back so we can do some more playing and, testing out to see if that works. And some of my kiddos, it works and they love it. And some of my kids are not at a space to tolerate that level of competition. And that's okay because everyone's different, right? So finding the different strategies that help meeting your learner where they're at, turning things into more reinforcing and naturally engaging activities, and just supporting that regulation need is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I really love that you're hitting on too is every kiddo needs something different. And by looking at a situation that may seem simple and turning it into something that can be a joyful experience, we're embedding what's called reinforcement, which for those who've listened to the podcast before, that's something we've talked about many, many times in many, many episodes about how we have to find ways to make the mundane or make the less preferred something joyful. How can we spark joy in an interaction or in an activity that previously has been met with significant anxiety? And you're going to, families are going to hear this as a big theme of this episode too. wording becomes a really powerful tool in how you are getting your child to engage in those non-preferred tasks, in those stressful
Absolutely.
situations. And what Justine was highlighting there with the game, instead of, hey, get up, go brush your teeth, then we're going to go downstairs. It's, oh my gosh, do you think you can race the bathroom in 5 seconds? I bet you we can see who, I can brush my teeth faster, or I can make this into a game. And so we're totally shaking up that interaction, where before it was a straight up demand, we're making it into play. Play reduces the anxiety for the learner. It makes it into something joyful. It pairs it with something exciting, which really just helps alleviate that power struggle that then exists from a simple straight up demand. And it also empowers the learner to feel like they have a sense of agency in a task demand. And I think that's a huge thing to highlight with a PDA profile is agency and feeling empowered is a huge way that you can get buy-in from your child to want to be successful in skills that were prior really stressful for them, or you were meeting this, oh my gosh, this thought where you're having, oh, nothing is working for my kid. I've tried everything. Well, it's speaking their language. It's finding what matters to them. And so, I think that a big thing that we talk about a lot is the role of perceived control. So I talked a lot about, a second ago, just about the power struggle. That's a big piece with PDA is our kiddos are pushing back because they want to feel like they have a say in what's going on. They don't want to feel like demands are put on them. And a problem that we see with a lot of traditional parenting philosophies is, well, I'm the adult, so it doesn't matter if you like what I say. The expectation is that you do it. But I think that reframe for families is going to be really powerful for them too, where you're still getting the desired outcome of brushing your teeth, packing your bag. But again, like what we said, we're embedding some joy in that. We're adding something exciting so that we're also reducing our own stress, like what Justine said too. That dysregulates you as a parent. When your child is having a full meltdown, when you're 10 minutes late to school already, you're about to miss the bus, having those moments where you don't have a power struggle and you can get through your day more smoothly, that's an important reframe for families, as well as why we have to really pick and choose what is our hill to die on. What are some things where I can't make this more fun or playful? It is what it is. Versus, you know what, I have some time. I can make this activity more exciting and more joyful. So I think a big piece of advice we always say is pick your battles intentionally. Does this have to be a demand right now? Is this the hill you really want to die on? And that's not to say that there aren't going to be some things in life that are just straight up demands that just happen. But it is to say that being intentional with the things that you choose and how you present it is going to be one of the most powerful tools that you can have as a parent supporting a learner with a PDA profile.
Yeah, honestly, you hit on so many great points I want to piggyback on. But I think the big one that really stood out to me from that too was the perceived control. So the way that we reframe and we word things and we take a different approach for typical strategies that might be typical for those previous parental ideologies, I think is really a good call out, because one difference of a sentence and how you say things can be the different catalyst between if a behavior escalates or if we're walking and rolling and keeping on with this daily routine that we're trying to get through. And sometimes just asking it instead of just saying it, or giving two options and what do you think is the best idea? Because a lot of times if I can make the decision and then everyone around me also thinks it was a good decision, like that's going to make me feel great about myself. That's a moment where I'm boosting my confidence, that positive inner self-talk, that ability that people trust my decision making. And this is as an adult in the work field. So and these are not just novel feelings that you develop as an adult. You feel that as a child too. If someone tells me something I did was great, or my artwork was great, or something that came from my little brain was a good idea, that makes me like you a little bit more. That makes me want to engage with you more. That makes me trust you more as an adult too, which that trust piece is also really important with PDA profiles, because I'm not going to listen to you if I don't trust you. For one, like there are moments where when you work with children with that profile over time, there is a level of built trust, especially if you learn how to speak their language. And then they are more receptive and more able to tolerate and regulate their bodies to follow through with some of those demands, especially like Ray said, there's going to be moments as they get older where there's not a way for me to make this more fun for you. Going to the doctor is not probably ever going to be reinforcing, especially if they're going for an ailment or whatever the case may be. And so we have to be able to tolerate some things are just not going to be fun. And something that I'm sure we're going to touch base on through all these different videos is why early intervention is so so important, because if we can start building these habits, start using these tools as early as we can, that tolerance will be able to be built up over time, maybe slowly, maybe quickly, but there will be able to be growth, so that when we get to those moments where this is not something I can really turn into the funnest thing in the world, that we have some of that tolerance. And even if the tolerance isn't there yet, we have those tools in the back pocket of the parents that have the child, the professionals that work with the child, that we know how to support you and regulate you and meet your needs and meet you where you're at, because we've been working on it for as long as we can. So I think that's also a good piece to tie into, is that learning how to speak the language of the learner or the kiddo or the person you're interacting with that might present this profile, and just supporting them and being open to developing that over time.
Right. I love that. I love that so much. I think you're hitting on so many amazing points too, where it is like, I mean, we say this a lot in ABA, everything we do is individualized, right? So like, even if someone fits a certain profile, that does not mean the same strategies work for every single person, right? Just like what Justine said when she was giving that example of, making things into a race. And she had highlighted the point of, well, are they in the space for that right now? Because for some kids, that might add anxiety, right? Where they're like, oh, well, wait, I wasn't ready. And now wait. And now you're adding a whole other layer to it. But for some kids, they hear competition. They're like, let's go. That's fun. But it's all in speaking their language. I think that's a beautiful tie-in. And the tie-in about early intervention, that's a big thing we've talked about in this podcast too, is outcomes for kiddos can be totally changed by starting early and leaning on your ABA and interdisciplinary team to create the best supports. But kind of going into some of that, the tools you're talking about, some of those strategies, like we said, of course, it's individualized, but there are some blanket strategies that can be a good starting point when you are looking at PDA profiles. And one thing we want to highlight too is, again, that language piece. And so one of the first things is using declarative language. So, I see that there's some toys on the floor. Instead of, can you pick up those toys? I'm not producing a demand. I'm using observational language to highlight the fact that there might be an action item that can happen. That helps create and lay down a foundation of agency for my kiddos immediately, right? Because sometimes, like what Justine was saying, one of their value bases as a human being may be access to that praise, access to that view and perception from other people that I'm helpful, I'm independent, I'm kind. They might go over and pick something up all on their own just because you highlighted that there was a need there, using that language. Another thing Justina just highlighted too was the choices, how powerful that is in creating a sense of agency. And another thing I know Justine and I both have utilized a ton with PDA learners and just autistic individuals as a whole is visualizing routines, creating visuals and tools to make demands predictable and tied to reinforcement in their routines. That can be incredibly powerful because it's not unexpected. It's a part of their everyday routine, and it adds that layer of desensitizing them to task demands that are more aversive. And then one of the last things too that we always say is a great general tool is collaborative problem solving. If there's an issue, by creating a space for the learner to collaborate with you on a solution, you are highlighting that they have autonomy in how they respond to problems. And with the PDA profile, where they want that control, they want to feel validated in their independence, you trusting them enough to involve them in problem solving instead of being like, oh, you spilled your milk. Go get paper towels. Well, you took away their agency in that moment. You took away their ability to problem solve something, which can even inadvertently create a sense of distrust. And I know trust was a big thing Justine was just highlighting in what she was talking about too. And really that is massive for our learners.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not really a foundation if there's not trust. And I mean, that goes without saying with children in general. We would want to promote them needing to build that level of trust first before just doing whatever an adult around them says. And, that's part of some of those safety skills we do work on with some of our learners that have ASD, is learning how to differentiate between someone who is safe and someone who's not, in conversations and things that you can have with those people. So trust is important across the board for any child, because we shouldn't, reinforce them just listening to anybody. But also, that means we're a team. I think another antecedent strategy, so something I try to do as a way to support the regulation for my kiddos before placing demands or having to do mundane tasks that they don't like, is really just making sure that it feels like everything is a team. So another strategy I utilize with one of my PDA kiddos is that if he's working on a task, I have my RBT right there next to him working on the same task if I can. We make copies of the same thing. If you don't like to color, we're both going to color. We're doing this as a team and we're talking about it. Oh, you colored blue? That was a great idea. I didn't think about using blue for that. You're so smart. And then just those small little nuggets of reinforcing the choices that they make, even if it's the smallest thing of coloring something blue instead of a different color, or, oh, you bent this way and now it made a really cool shape. I love that idea. And, if it's something that they really don't like to do, hey, I really don't like to do this either, but let's knock it out as a team. Or, it has been beneficial for the client that I'm using that strategy with, that it's not just I have to do it because you told me, it's we're doing it together. And then we have something reinforcing right on the other side of that rainbow that we get to access as soon as we've knocked it out. So just being able to develop those antecedent tools is a really important part of supporting, those kiddos and those learners with those profiles.
Well, an antecedent too, which I know we've talked about what this means generally for learners, but it is before the behavior. I know Justine talked about that. So whenever you hear us talking about those antecedent manipulations, it's how can we get ahead of a behavior before it occurs? All those things that Justine just mentioned. And when she says antecedent, it's always getting ahead of the behavior. And that's when you're going to be the most successful, is catching a behavior before it happens, right? Thinking ahead. And so Justine tied in, it was a beautiful explanation of ways that we can support. And she talked a lot about validation and praise and the role that can serve. And something that we kind of like to call that is like yes time, right? Like we love the ideas that you're sharing. Like, yes, that was great. Yes, that was brilliant. And that actually leads into a behavioral tool that we use all the time, which is called behavioral momentum. If you're ever a parent who is, either actively in ABA services with their kids, your behavior analyst listening to this podcast, you've probably heard of, behavioral momentum. And so that essentially is where you're taking those small strides to really work toward a bigger action. So think about it like you're rolling something down a hill. At first, it goes really slowly. You're taking that really big push. You're taking small little steps, and then it just goes. After you've pushed it, it's taking small little wins and working up to something big. So by building in that yes time into your routine, you're working toward the big stuff. So really thinking about your ultimate end goal. Another tie-in I kind of want to move to is talking about some of that dysregulation that we had kind of touched on earlier. So dysregulation happens not only with the child who's experiencing distress over the demand that was presented, but also for the parents. And I think that that's going to be a really important thing for us to highlight in this conversation, is that there is a huge piece of you as the parent, as the caregiver, as the BCBA, checking your own emotional state when supporting the learner who's experiencing those big emotions. Because with the PDA profile, it can be very mentally taxing to be the adult supporting a child through those moments, because your wording is very important. How you're presenting demands is very important. Justine and I always joke that learners with this profile are like little lawyers, or, they are able to like work through and really challenge you with the way that you think. And so you really have to be on. And that can mean that your threshold for dysregulation in yourself can be a lot higher, especially if you're a parent and this is your reality 24/7. So those strategies that, you can utilize, which I'm sure Justine can touch on some of those because she's like the regulation queen. But there's so many things that you can do as an adult to regulate yourself before you're putting yourself in the role of, okay, let me take care of you. And how can I support you?
Yeah, I love how you touched on all of those things. I learned about regulation strategies and things from Ray. So although she's hyping me up, she's also the person that taught me a lot about it. So kudos to her. But I mean, I think that's really important too, identifying what your regulation strategies are and being able to identify what your learner or your kiddo or your client's regulation strategies are. Sometimes I even talk about that, candidly with my kiddos, as far as like, oh, if I'm upset and I'm angry, this is something that really helps me. I like to squeeze stress balls. And something I like to do as far as like from a programming standpoint is I always like to work on you telling me what things you like and don't like and how they help you feel, or if they don't help you feel differently in these moments. Because if you have a client or a kiddo that has that level of functioning and autonomy to communicate those needs, it's always important to get their input. Back on that piece that Ray mentioned about the individualization is, if they're able to tell me what they like and they don't like, I'm listening. I'm soaking up everything you're telling me, because it only gives me more information to better individualize my strategies for your needs, and then to teach that to parents, and then they can translate that at home too. So
Yes.
getting their buy-in and letting them tell you like, this does help me feel better, or no, this doesn't really help me feel better, and utilizing that. And for kiddos who are not able to communicate that to you, is testing out all of the things that have been proven to be helpful. And don't just go off the rails and try any crazy thing. We want to make sure we're being ethical and we're being safe. But if your kiddo is a kiddo that likes to bounce, let's find some ways to meet that need. If you like to bounce, I'm going to help you, get access to bouncing as much to get you some of that input and output before we even talk about something or do something that might be dysregulating. And if it's on the consequence end, so we're already in the thick of dealing with the behavior piece, then I'm going to give you access to things I know give you that sensory input that have been tried and true through things we have tested out.
Yes.
I do want to give this the advice that I wouldn't test out a coping strategy when they're already dysregulated, because you might not get a fair or accurate response. We want to make sure we're happy, regulated, and engaged, and learning these things before the behavior occurs. But obviously, anything that is helpful with keeping safety, that is a number one priority always.
Always, yeah.
But just making sure that we're working on these things, not just when the kiddo's upset. We're consistently trying to build these tools and this toolbox of things that we can utilize that are helpful to you. Because another important call out about regulation strategies is it's not always going to work every single time. If I get mad today, squeezing the stress might be helpful, but tomorrow that might not be the thing that suffices in that moment. So the more tools, the better. And that's something that I think Ray taught me very early on, and definitely expanded the way that I look at supporting my kiddos with those regulation needs.
Well, very sweet, very sweet. But I think, I love everything that you're saying, because I think that is like such a powerful piece of advice for our families, because when you are approaching regulation, when you are approaching your learner, think of every day and every situation as a new kiddo, because there's so many factors that impact how we respond to regulation strategies, or how we respond to our day and stressors. Like, did they sleep? Did they eat? Are they just in a mood today? Like, that's going to mean that they might not be as open to some things that maybe take a little bit more effort. And so I love that call out. And I think that that's going to be so helpful for families, is try things out when you're in a happy space. Try things out when the kiddo is playful and will be doing all the silly things with you. And I love that you're talking about the input piece too, because if you have a learner who has those high vocal verbal skills, yes, involve them, keep them a part of that journey, because it is their world, right? It is their emotion. So getting their input is huge. And it can be a little bit more challenging if you're working with kiddos that have a PDA profile who don't have the verbal skills to express when they do or don't like things. That's where we really lean into what's called being a behavior detective. Look into what their body is showing you. Look into the facial expressions. Look into how long they're engaging with a strategy when you're trying it, when they're regulated. If it's bouncing, like what Justine was saying, and let's say you have a little bounce pad and they're standing on there for like 5, 10 plus minutes, you might have something there. Versus they step on it, they walk away. Okay, you don't need to have their words saying, to know that that wasn't something that excited them. So I really would say, as a parent or as a behavior analyst, whoever is taking in this podcast, really feel empowered in utilizing the strategies to know that you're the parent. Your kiddo, there's so many nonverbal things that our parents tell us during parent trainings of like, well, I can always tell so-and-so is feeling really happy because they look out of the side of their eye and they always do XYZ. So there's so many things that we do to pick up on nonverbal cues, and those can also be strategies that we use to identify ways to cope for those nonverbal or lower verbal skill learners. And also with coping strategies for parents, especially if you're in that consequence end of it. The behavior's happened. It's big. It's heavy. There's a lot going on right now. When I'm in those moments, I honestly really like to do progressive muscle relaxation. For those who are not familiar with it, it's one of my favorite tools. It's scientifically backed. There's a lot of literature about it. So if anyone is curious, we can probably link some of that in our show notes. But so essentially, it's tensing and relaxing different muscle groups, either starting from head to toe or toe to head, moving up, and just slowly tensing and releasing. What I like is it's covert. You can still talk and engage with your learner while things are happening, and you're just tensing and relaxing different muscle groups, giving yourself that input if you need it, while still being able to respond and support your child in the moment. If, let's say, you're feeling incredibly dysregulated and your child's having a moment, it is okay to take a second, just take a few deep breaths, right? The problem is still going to be there for you to handle, I promise you, as long as your child is safe and they're at a safe place where you can just take a slow, deep breath and walk away. I recommend doing so because you're going to be way more equipped to be able to handle the needs of your learner and your child in that moment. Just you know, anything to add on that one too.
No, I think that definitely being able to regulate yourself in the moment, if you can, when you're supporting your learner or your child when they're dysregulated, is super important because, like we mentioned about, your verbiage and your, the words that you choose, tone is also important too.
Yes.
Our kiddos who are able to pick up on those social nonverbal cues, saying, "Hey, I really like how you did that," and "Hey, I don't like how you did that." Even if the wording is the same or the different, the tone makes all the difference, and it also can add to more of that dysregulation because I remember as a kid, if I could hear someone who yelled, if your volume was too high, that was kind of dysregulating to me. If you had a deeper bass in your voice, then that was kind of dysregulating too. It definitely hits my ear differently, and I'm like, oh, I should pay attention to that. Versus if someone walks in with a softer voice, a softer tone, not as high of a volume, it's not as attention grabbing. It's not as, oh, I need to be alert and know what's going on. So I think that's a piece too. And it's not always the easiest thing to regulate your tone when you're already upset.
Yeah.
So being able to help yourself in those ways will definitely help the learner and the rapport between you and the child, whether that is your own kiddo or if it's someone you're working with. So just give yourself grace, and that's not the easiest skill to build up to. And all of this is to say that we don't expect you to turn around and be able to do all these strategies in a matter of time, but always give yourself grace and understand that, flexibility is needed for you and for the kiddo, and it's not giving in, but it's a strategic way to be able to navigate these moments and keep everyone safe and get back to HRE, happiness, regulation, and engagement.
Yes.
As soon as both of you guys can.
Yes, absolutely. And so those are some just general strategies to kind of utilize, language being a big piece, regulation being a big piece. We talked about choice, all sorts of strategies that can be utilized as a foundational piece to springboard off of, to then go into some more individualized strategies to create motivation and behavior momentum for your learner. We did want to break down just some general common myths because there's a lot of parent guilt that surrounds PDA, especially because, like we talked about before, there's this misconception that kiddos are being defiant to be defiant. I'm the parent. Why aren't they listening to me? My kiddo's so poorly behaved. Why, if they don't follow through with this, how are they going to survive in the world? They're being so spoiled. There's so many things that, parents will express as frustrations and fears because there's just a lot of guilt around it. And so, Justine, maybe if you want to go into some of those, I guess, some reframes that we can utilize for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a common one is being worried that being that flexible is going to spoil your child or, kind of give in to the behavior. But through tried and true strategies and being able to meet the learner where they're at, getting more buy-in, it supports a better rapport between yourself and the kiddo, whether that is your client or that is, your child. It supports more trust being there because once trust is broken, it's a lot harder to get it back. And feeling trust in those moments when you're vulnerable because you are dysregulated is extremely important, for the kiddo to be bought in long-term about trusting you and letting you be able to lead them, especially when they have a PDA profile. And then another one that I talk to my parents often about is just like these strategies might not work in the real world. And we can be candid to say that the real world is not going to cater to the needs of one person. And we see that across multiple different settings and needs and things that might occur. But you're right. I mean, the world is not going to just turn around and be different and more accepting and accommodating space for children and people with special needs. But what we're doing is that we are meeting them where they're at, and we're going to shape over time to support them being ready for things that are going to be what they access in the real world. And, supporting and teaching the kiddo that they're going to be able to make it in the real world from practicing these strategies and being able to communicate to other people that what they need and what they are going to benefit from having in the real world if they have that capability. So it's really important to just look at things from a different way as far as being more positive. And it is not the easiest profile of kiddo to support, but working on those strategies, using the tips and tricks, finding the research and using that to better your strategies and your knowledge about the profile is always going to be a great way to support you and the kid with being able to get things that are working up and rolling. So we do also want to make that call out about validating that feeling, because it is not the easiest profile of a learner or a kiddo to work with. And it isn't the easiest to program for, even as a BCBA or a professional working with that kiddo with that profile, or a teacher or a SPED department head. You have to get creative, and you have to be observant and vigilant about the way that you are speaking to the learner that you are, working with. So it will get exhausting at moments. It is going to be tiring, and it's going to be something that takes a lot of energy out of you in the moment. But it's one of those things where the harder you work on the front end, the less work there will have to be on the back end, because we've learned these strategies, we've gotten it down, we understand the language that that our learner is speaking, and now we've gotten to a point where the strategies are in, they're successful using them, and some of that exhaustion and some of that fear and some of that grief will then go away over that time piece. So yeah, sometimes, on top of that, the strategies and things is finding resources for yourself and finding resources when you can for your learner and client. And I think Ray has a really good touch point about like some of the resources and some of the red flags to let you know, hey, it's time for me to start looking for these resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, I mean, something that we highlight a lot within our conversations is the importance of an interdisciplinary team. And what this means is getting a holistic perspective when supporting your learners, because every discipline has different focuses, different things that they're looking for, different ways that they can highlight skill building for your family, for the learner. And so when looking at some of those red flags, sometimes where, this might be my cue that I need to seek out some additional supports. If you're seeing in school, there's a lot of refusal. We're having trouble getting through basic transitions in school, meaning moving from activities, moving on from different task demands in school. That may be a time where an ABA provider could actually be a really good support for you, or seeing what other resources your school has to be able to support you in that moment. If you're having daily meltdowns, your child's having daily meltdowns over some basic daily living tasks. Again, basic transitions between things. Let's say like moving from dinner time to bedtime routine. Just small things that are now feeling like really big challenges. That would be a great time to look at some additional supports. Another thing is, again, looking at our family dynamic as a whole. If you're seeing that the PDA profile that's your learner or child's experiencing is starting to impact the entire family unit, your whole family is having to revolve around the avoidance that's occurring. Like, I can't say these words. My child can't do these tasks. That's a time to really start thinking about how additional supports being involved in your child's treatment might be beneficial. When you're looking for those supports, though, which we do have a whole episode on finding good ABA providers, which of course we're always proponents of seeking out ABA support, because behavior is behavior and everyone can benefit from that. But some key points that Justine and I both really believe are important when you're looking for professionals to support your family and your child is looking for neurodiversity of forming care. This means that you're working with an individual and a professional who is not focused on changing your child, but supporting their unique needs to make them successful. And when we're looking through a neurodivergent affirming lens, we're finding strategies that really fit the individual. We're not shaping into quote unquote normalcy. We're shaping to have an individual be successful, happy, and healthy, and not trying to change the core of who a person is. Additionally, looking for some trauma-informed care, especially with PDA profiles. There can be some significant trauma that comes along with that, especially because schools, families are often ill-equipped to be able to support learners with this profile. So that can lead to, let's say restraints have been utilized in school because behaviors have gotten out of hand, or other things have happened that have created trauma. Working with providers who know how to support that type of profile and are trauma informed, that's going to be huge in producing some better long-term outcomes. Um, Additionally, and this kind of goes into trauma-informed and neurodiversity affirmed care, is looking at collaborative versus compliance-based programming. And this is something I've touched on in earlier episodes, is looking at someone who wants to work with you, wants to work with the child, wants to support the learner, wants to make sure they're in a happy, relaxed, and engaged state, and they're not just focus on your kiddo just sitting down and following instructions. That's not the purpose. The purpose is building up on autonomy and tolerance, so that we can work together, have a happy, healthy, and successful life. Last little point about supports: talk to your schools. We talk about, ARDs, so some of those meetings that you have where your child's either getting on an IEP, so individualized education plan. There are different behavioral supports that can be put in place, making sure your child is supported, and that you're bringing in other professionals into those conversations with the school to make sure that a holistic perspective is being utilized when supporting your child within a school setting. So that's going to be really, really huge.
Yeah, absolutely. The piece of what we call in the ABA realm of coordination of care, which just means we are coordinating to better benefit the child that we are caring for, is really important, because those strategies remaining the same across settings is also going to support with lower, variability in behavior, or what we call behavior contrast, which just means sometimes the behavior looks like this in one place, but it looks completely different in another place, which is common. Different variables in the environment produce different behaviors sometimes. So being able to collaborate and make sure the kiddo is supported in all these different spaces also benefits their generalization. So the ability for them to do this skill, whether it's regulating or tolerating something being told to them at home while they're, and also at school, and also if they go to ABA, or if they're part of a sports team, or if they're part of like an art club, we want them to be able to feel the ability to regulate themselves, or advocate for themselves if they need support with regulating, no matter what setting that they're in. So that piece about coordination of care or collaborating for a holistic approach is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, we've obviously shared a lot of different tools, a lot of different, there's a lot of things for you guys to chew on with this episode. It may be one that you listen to a few times just to really digest everything.
Yeah.
We do plan on linking some just different tools and notes. We are going to be using our social media platforms to also share more about PDA profiles for those who are just curious about learning a little bit more and are using this episode as a springboard. But just, a few takeaways and some closing thoughts we really want to highlight is that PDA is not a parenting failure. It just helps us as those supporting, the kiddos with PDA profiles to understand the why and changes the how. And small shifts can really help reduce everyone's stress. Utilizing small strategies can create a really big impact in building behavior momentum.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I guess one little closing thought to leave you guys with is to really think about what demands might feel the biggest to my child right now, and what are some small changes I can make to turn big stressors into joyful opportunities.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you guys so much for sitting and listening to us talk about something that is so important to us, because we've been able to collaborate on cases that are kiddos who present with a PDA profile. And it's been such an amazing learning moment too. I have to say that my kiddos with my PDA profiles, they keep me on my toes. They make me a better practitioner, because they really help with me thinking outside the box and having to individualize and take it a step further, and then another step further, and then a step to the left and the right, and now we're doing the Cupid shuffle. So it's really great working with those kiddos, and they're so smart. And that tidbit that she mentioned about making a joke about them being lawyers, is that some of the best arguers I've ever heard are some of my kiddos with those PDA profiles, and then they make points and you're like,
that was good.
Actually, really
right. You're
so
right. What did you think that? Yeah.
And as a practitioner, if you are the person listening to this podcast, don't ever take that as oh no, like I made a mistake. It's a learning opportunity. these, all of our kiddos bring something to us to make us a better practitioner, no matter if it's related to PDA profiles or sensory seeking or, nonverbal communication or verbal communication. We learn from every kiddo that we're blessed to, get to collaborate with their families to support their care. So, I'm just thankful that we've had that opportunity. I'm thankful you guys for listening in to us talk about something that's so important to us and emerging in our field. It's not something that's diagnosed here in the state, but it's definitely something that psychologists and ABA practitioners are focusing on. So there may be more information on the future. And if we need to do another podcast talking about it some more, we definitely can.
So there's so much to cover with it.
Right. But we're keeping it behavioral. We're guiding autism, fostering hope. We are here for you every other week. Please give us a follow on Insta at Keeping It Behavioral. We are behavior analysts, but we are not giving individualized advice or treatment guidance. We're just creating a community of support.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.